She was rejected outside marriage hall until Vampire King little girl asked, "Can you be my new mom?" Snow swirled in delicate spirals, frosting the cobblestones, while the golden lights of the marriage hall glowed warmly against the evening gloom. Inside, laughter and music floated through the air, a contrast to the biting cold outside. Elara wrapped her cloak tightly around her shoulders, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. Tonight was supposed to be the turning point in her life. Her heart carried the fragile hope that the arranged meeting might finally bring her a sense of belonging, a chance to be seen as more than the whispers that followed her everywhere. She stepped through the grand doors of the hall, her boots clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The chandeliers above shimmered like frozen stars, casting a golden glow that made the hall feel alive. Nobles in their fine garments turned to look at her as she entered. Some regarded her with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. Elara's stomach twisted. She had prepared herself for judgment, but not for the cold cruelty that awaited. Her intended, a young nobleman with a prideful air, stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The crowd hushed, sensing the tension. "Ah," he said, his voice smooth but sharp. "So this is the one I am to meet. How interesting." He gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Tell me, have you any skills, accomplishments, anything that might make you suitable for our house?" Elara's cheeks burned. She had expected hesitation, perhaps doubt, but not mockery. She began, her voice barely above a whisper, but the words caught in her throat. The nobleman's family leaned forward, their expressions sharp. "She is unrefined," one whispered. "Look at her, who would ever accept her in the royal line?" A ripple of laughter spread through the hall. Elara's heart sank. Every step she had taken to reach this moment, every hopeful thought, seemed to crumble beneath the weight of their judgment. I tried to prepare," she said softly, feeling tears prick the corners of her eyes. She could feel the stares, the weight of countless eyes judging her every gesture. The nobleman's smirk widened. "Prepare? For what? You cannot hide what is lacking within. Leave us before you bring more embarrassment." Humiliation burned through her veins like ice. She could not speak. Her mind felt numb. The music and laughter in the hall became a distant echo as her world narrowed to a single point of unbearable shame. Without another word, she turned and fled. Outside, the cold wind bit into her face, and the snow seemed to catch her tears, freezing them instantly. She stumbled through the courtyard, clutching her cloak tightly around herself. The golden light of the hall was behind her, and yet the darkness ahead was not empty, it was heavy with silence. "Elara!" The voice was soft, clear, and small. She froze and turned, her heart skipping a beat. Standing before her was a little girl, no older than 7, with hair as dark as night and eyes that shone like polished silver. She wore a small, finely stitched cloak, and despite the cold, she seemed untouched by it. The girl stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "Are you sad?" Elara blinked, taken aback by the innocence and honesty in the child's voice. I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I think yes." The little girl studied her, tilting her head slightly. "I don't like seeing people sad," she said simply. "Especially nice people." She stepped even closer, her tiny hand reaching for Elara's. Will you be my new mom?" The question hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Elara felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. A child's trust, so simple and pure, pierced the armor of despair that had formed around her heart. I don't know," Elara whispered, unsure what to say. She had never been asked such a question before, never by someone so young, so certain. Yet the longing in the little girl's eyes made her want to believe, made her want to accept. "My father, he is lonely," the child said. He wants someone kind, someone who isn't afraid." Elara's breath caught. The notion of meeting a vampire king, the ruler of an ancient, feared line, seemed impossible, even terrifying. Yet the child's trust made it feel like destiny, like the first step in a life she had never dared to imagine. Where is he?" Elara asked cautiously. The little girl's eyes sparkled. "Come with me," she said, taking Alara's hand. Despite the cold, Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a strange mix of fear and hope. She allowed herself to be led through the misty courtyard, the world outside the hall fading further behind them. At the edge of the courtyard, standing in the shadows, was a figure so tall and commanding that Alara instinctively drew back. His presence seemed to absorb the very light around him, yet his gaze, though sharp and assessing, held a strange, unreadable quality. This was the Vampire King, King Valerius. Alara's heart raced. His hair was dark, flowing like liquid night, and his eyes were sharp, almost luminous in the dim light. The shadows of his castle seemed to cling to him as if he were a part of them. He did not move forward, only watched, his expression calm but intense. The little girl tugged at Alara's hand. "Father, this is her. Can she stay?" Valerius' eyes shifted to Alara, and she felt as if he were looking straight into her soul. The world seemed to slow. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest. She felt fear, awe, and a strange, unexplainable pull toward him. "Who are you?" His voice was low, smooth, and held the weight of centuries. Every word was measured, deliberate. Alara swallowed hard. I am Alara. I came here tonight, but I was rejected." She hesitated, feeling the sting of shame rise again, yet the child's tiny hand in hers gave her courage. I did not mean to bring trouble." Valerius said nothing, only studied her, his gaze unrelenting. Alara felt her knees weaken under the intensity of his eyes. The air between them seemed to thrum with invisible energy, like the calm before a storm. The little girl stepped forward. "Father, she is kind. She is brave. Please let her stay." For the first time, Valerius' expression softened, just a fraction. He looked away, the shadows around him seeming to ripple and shift. Alara noticed a flicker of something hidden in his gaze, grief, perhaps, or longing, buried deep beneath his centuries of rule. He finally spoke, his voice carrying both authority and quiet curiosity. "You would step into my world knowing the dangers." Alara's heart pounded, but she held her head high. I will try for her, for your daughter." Valerius' eyes narrowed slightly. "Many have tried. Most fail." Alara's lips pressed into a thin line, determination hardening within her. "Then I will not fail," she said softly, yet firmly. The little girl smiled, her silver eyes shining like stars. She clapped her small hands. "See, I told you she will stay." Valerius' gaze lingered on Alara, unreadable and intense. Then, without a word, he turned and gestured toward the castle. The massive doors groaned as they opened, revealing a shadowy interior filled with history, mystery, and danger. Alara felt a shiver of fear, yet something else, something thrilling, stir within her chest. She had no idea what awaited her inside, only that her life had changed forever. The child's hand in hers felt like a lifeline, a promise of connection in a world she had never known. As she took her first steps into the castle, she glanced back at the courtyard one last time. The snow continued to fall, silent and white, covering the city in a blanket of forgotten hopes and whispered dreams. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. Whatever awaited inside, she would face it. And above all, she would not turn away from the little girl who had chosen her, who had trusted her with a love so simple and pure that even the darkest shadows seemed powerless against it. Alara did not yet know the secrets, curses, or challenges that awaited her. She did not yet understand the weight of the Vampire King's world. But one thing was clear. Tonight, a spark had been lit, a spark that would ignite change, longing, and a bond that no shadow could ever truly extinguish. The castle doors closed behind her with a slow, resonant echo, and the wind whispered through the courtyard, carrying a single message into the night. The castle loomed like a sentinel of shadow on the cliffside, its black stone walls disappearing into the thick mist that wrapped around the cliffs below. The path to the entrance was lined with ancient statues, their faces frozen in solemn silence. watching as Alara followed little Lyra through the towering doors. The air inside was cool, carrying the faint scent of old wood and candle wax, mingled with something more ancient, something alive. Alara's heart raced. The corridors stretched endlessly, lined with towering bookshelves and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. Despite the grandeur, there was a weight to the place, as though centuries of history and sorrow had been etched into every stone. Lyra skipped ahead, her small hand guiding Alara toward a large set of double doors. "Father will see you now," she said, her voice light and cheerful, belying the tension that Alara felt in her chest. Alara's mind raced with questions. What is he like? Will he accept me? Will he be kind or dangerous? The words of the nobleman in the marriage hall, the laughter and whispers, still echoed painfully in her memory. And yet, Lyra's faith in her gave her courage she did not know she possessed. The doors opened, and there he stood, King Valerius. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, with a presence that seemed to bend the very air around him. His hair, black as midnight, flowed past his shoulders, framing a face both beautiful and terrifying. His eyes, those striking, silver eyes, looked directly at her, piercing as if he could read her soul. Every step he took resonated with the authority of centuries. Alara bowed slightly, unsure whether it was respect, fear, or instinct that guided her movements. I am Alara," she said softly. "Lyra told me she wished for me to meet you." Valerius regarded her silently. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as though the air itself had stopped to watch this meeting. Then slowly he spoke, his voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "You are brave," he said. "Not many would face me so willingly." Alara's heart thumped. I only wish to care for Lyra," she replied, "and to help if I can." Valerius' eyes narrowed slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed yet strangely alive. "To care for my daughter is no small task. She is clever, willful, and she will test anyone who enters her life." Lyra, standing close by, looked up at her father and whispered, "She is not afraid of me, father. She listens. She cares." For the first time, a hint of softness touched Valerius' features. Alara noticed it and felt a flicker of hope, though she knew better than to mistake it for complete approval. "Very well," he said, his voice still calm but carrying a weight of command. "You will remain in the castle. You will learn our ways, and you will prove yourself, not just to me but to the world you have chosen to enter." Alara's pulse quickened. "I will do my best." Valerius inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging her words. "Do not mistake kindness for weakness. Many who enter my halls are unprepared for the truths they will face. The castle, it tests all who step within. And so do I." Alara swallowed. The air seemed to thicken with unspoken danger. And yet she felt a strange thrill. For the first time in her life, she felt alive in a way she had never imagined. Over the following days, Alara began to learn the rhythms of the castle. She rose early with Lyra, helping her dress and serving breakfast in the grand dining hall. The castle was vast and alive, filled with corridors that whispered secrets and hidden chambers that glowed with faint magical light. Valerius observed her constantly, his gaze never cruel, but never entirely soft either. Sometimes she would catch him standing in the shadows, watching her with an intensity that made her heart flutter and her mind spin. She began to notice small details, how he moved with the quiet grace of a predator, how the slightest gesture of his hand could command attention, and how his presence seemed to bend the very air around him. Yet despite the formidable power he radiated, there were moments, rare and fleeting, when she glimpsed a man haunted by solitude and regret. Lyra was the bridge between them, her laughter and curiosity softening the edges of Valerius' sternness. She dragged Alara through the castle gardens, played hide-and-seek in the library, and demanded bedtime stories that often ended in the little girl's delighted giggles. In those moments, Valerius would watch from the doorway, silently, the faintest curve of a smile on his lips. One evening, Alara accompanied Lyra to the moonlit terrace. The wind carried the scent of the sea and the faint tang of magic. Lyra looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting the silver light. "Do you think Father will like me?" Alara asked softly, unsure if she should even voice the question. Lyra tilted her head, considering. He likes you already. He just doesn't know it yet. He's complicated." Alara laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign and warm in the cold night air. Complicated is one word for it. Before she could continue, Valerius appeared at the terrace doors, his long coat brushing the floor. "I heard laughter," he said, his voice calm but carrying that unmistakable weight. "It is not often I hear such sound within these walls." Alara felt her cheeks warm, but she met his gaze steadily. "It is Lyra's laughter," she said. "And she brings it to everyone, even the castle itself." Valerius studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slightly. "You have courage," he said, "and patience, rare qualities in a world where most are weak or selfish." Alara's chest tightened. The words were a kind of acknowledgement she had never known. Yet the danger in his gaze reminded her that trust was not freely given in this place. "The castle tests us all," he continued. "It is not merely walls and halls, but the weight of centuries, the burdens of history, and the shadows that linger where light cannot reach. You must understand this if you wish to remain." "I will learn," she said quietly. I want to help. Not just Lyra, but you and this castle." For a long moment Valerius said nothing. Then, with the faintest sigh, he turned away. "We shall see," he murmured, disappearing into the darkness of the hall. The next days were a series of subtle tests. Alara learned the castle's secrets, how to navigate the winding corridors, how to recognize the subtle signs of magic woven into the walls, and how to understand Lyra's moods, which often reflected the unspoken currents of the castle itself. Valerius watched silently, appearing unexpectedly in rooms she had thought empty, questioning her, observing her reactions. He never raised his voice, never scolded, but the weight of his gaze was a constant reminder that she was in a world where one misstep could have serious consequences. Yet, amidst the tension, small moments of connection began to form. One night while tending to Lyra's candle-lit bedtime, Alara noticed the king's silhouette in the doorway. He watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You care for her deeply," he said finally, his voice softer than usual. Alara looked up, startled. I do. She has no one else." Valerius stepped closer, the candlelight catching the sharp lines of his face. "Many who enter my halls fail not because they lack skill or courage, but because they cannot endure the weight of this life. You endure. That is rare." Alara felt her heart flutter. I want to try, for her, for both of you." Valerius said nothing more that night, only lingered in the doorway for a moment before fading into the shadows. And yet in that silence there was a recognition, a subtle acknowledgement that her presence mattered. Lyra, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, her laughter and trust a beacon in the otherwise shadowed halls. Every time Alara faltered in fear or doubt, Lyra's hand in hers reminded her that courage was not always loud or grand. It could be as simple as choosing to stay, to care, to love. But even as Alara began to feel a place for herself in the castle, a sense of unease lingered. The shadows were deeper here, and the air carried whispers of ancient secrets. She could feel it, an unseen weight pressing on the edges of her mind, a warning that this world, as enchanting as it was, held dangers she could not yet understand. One evening, as snow fell silently against the castle windows, Alara found a crimson mark on her palm. She did not remember touching anything sharp or hot. It glowed faintly in the candlelight, pulsing with a strange, cold energy. Her heart raced. Lyra gasped when she saw it. "It's an omen," the child whispered. "The shadows, they are speaking. Father, he will know." Alara shivered. She held out her hand to Valerius when he arrived. He examined it carefully, his eyes narrowing. "This is no ordinary mark," he said, his voice low. "It is a warning from the past, a shadow that lingers still. Whoever carries it steps into the depths of something far older than themselves." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. The castle had begun to reveal its true nature, the weight of centuries, of curses, and of powers unseen. And now she was a part of it, whether she was ready or not. Valeria studied her for a long moment, then turned to Lyra. "She has chosen to stay," he said quietly. "That is remarkable, but she must know the path ahead is not easy." Lyra's eyes sparkled with determination. "I know, but she is strong. I trust her." Alara swallowed, feeling both fear and resolve. She had stepped into a world of shadows and power, of secrets and ancient curses. And yet she could not turn back. Not now. Not when a small hand had chosen her, and a lonely heart silently awaited her courage. The castle seemed to breathe around her, alive with hidden eyes and whispered echoes. And in the stillness, Alara understood that this was only the beginning, a beginning of trials, revelations, and a bond that could change everything. The night deepened, the wind howled against the stone walls, and the candlelight flickered, casting long shadows. In that darkness, one truth remained clear. She had entered a world that would test her, haunt her, and shape her. And through it all, she would not be alone. The castle's library was vast and quiet, with towering shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly into shadow. The scent of old parchment filled the air, mingling with the faint tang of candle wax. Alara walked between the aisles with Lyra skipping ahead, her small hands brushing against the spines of ancient tomes. "This one looks interesting," Lyra said, pointing to a thick leather-bound book. Alara picked it up, feeling the weight of history in her hands. The pages were yellowed and delicate, inscribed with words in a script she had never seen before. The library was more than a collection of books. It was a repository of centuries of knowledge, secrets, and power. "Be careful," Valerius' voice broke the silence. He stepped from the shadows, his presence immediately filling the room with authority. "Many of these books hold truths that are dangerous to the unprepared." Alara turned to face him, startled, but she did not shrink away. "I want to understand," she said softly. "I want to know this world and help Lyra and you if I can." Valerius studied her, his gaze sharp yet contemplative. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Then you shall learn, but you must understand something first. This castle, this family, it carries a curse that has shaped every generation. The knowledge here is not just history, it is warning." Alara's heart quickened. She had sensed shadows before, had felt unease in the quiet corners of the castle, but the word curse made her pulse hammer in her chest. "A curse," she whispered. Valerius' expression darkened, the faintest shadow passing over his face. "Long ago, my ancestors made a pact with forces beyond the mortal realm. Power was gained, yes, but it came with a price. Each generation has been bound by this curse, each bound to the castle, to its shadows, and to the bloodline that carries the mark." Lyra's small hand gripped Alara's. "What kind of curse?" she asked innocently, her voice trembling slightly. Valerius knelt to meet her eyes, his tone softer than before, yet still carrying the weight of centuries. "The curse ensures that those we love most are always at risk. It tests loyalty, courage, and heart. Those who are not strong enough, they do not survive the trials it sets." Alara felt a chill creep up her spine. She had stepped into a world of shadow and ancient power, yet she had never imagined the danger that might accompany it. I will try," she said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her heart. "For Lyra, for you, I will not fail." Valerius' eyes softened slightly, though the tension never fully left them. "Many have tried and failed," he said quietly. "Do you understand what it means to face not only enemies, but the consequences of choices made centuries before your birth?" Alara nodded, though inside, doubt fluttered. She could not ignore the weight of the centuries, the unspoken history that seemed to press down on her shoulders. Yet her determination burned brighter than her fear. Over the following days, Valerius began to reveal fragments of the castle's past. He led Alara through hidden chambers filled with relics, each telling a story of sacrifice, heartbreak, and resilience. Some rooms were filled with portraits of ancestors, their eyes seemingly following her. She felt the weight of their judgment and approval, an invisible audience watching her every step. One evening, as they walked through the castle gardens under the silver light of the moon, Valerius spoke of a tragedy that had shaped him. "I loved once," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. Before this castle became what it is, I loved and I lost. She was taken by the curse, by my family's choices, and I have carried that grief ever since." Alara's heart ached at the sorrow in his voice. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I cannot imagine what that feels like." Valerius' jaw tightened, and for a moment the cold authority returned. "It is not a story for pity," he said. "It is a lesson. The curse does not forgive weakness, and it does not grant mercy. Every bond, every choice, it is tested. And the deeper the love, the greater the danger." Alara shivered, but she did not retreat. She reached out, gently brushing Lyra's hair from her face. "Then we will face it together," she said softly. "You, Lyra, and I, we will endure it together." Lyra smiled, her small hand clutching Alara's. "Yes, we are strong." Valerius watched them, a storm of emotions hidden behind his calm facade. There was admiration in his eyes, tempered by caution. He had ruled over darkness for centuries, yet here was a woman who dared to step into his life, unafraid, determined, and kind. That night, as Alara slept in a guest chamber near Lyra, she dreamt of shadows twisting in the candlelight, of whispers that called her name. The crimson mark on her palm, which had appeared days before, glowed faintly in her dream, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. In her dream, a spectral figure appeared, a woman, beautiful and sorrowful, her face veiled in shadow. "She comes," the ghost whispered. "The one who touches our hearts, she carries both hope and danger. Choose wisely, Vampire King. Her fate is bound to yours and to your child." Alara awoke with a start, her heart pounding. The candle flickered beside her, casting long shadows across the room. She could not shake the feeling that the castle itself was alive, watching, testing, waiting. Morning came, and with it, a rare smile from Valerius. He approached her in the library, holding a small leather book. "You have courage," he said quietly, "and curiosity. That is why I entrust this to you." Alara took the book, feeling its weight in her hands. It was a journal of his lost love, filled with notes, sketches, and thoughts from centuries past. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Because," Valerius said, his voice low but steady, "you have already shown more strength than many who have lived a lifetime in these halls. The curse tests not just power but heart, and you have heart." Alara felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a fragile hope that perhaps she could belong here. Yet the ghostly warning of her dream lingered, a reminder that the path ahead would not be easy. As days turned into weeks, Alara learned more about the castle, its magic, and its history. She discovered hidden passageways that whispered secrets of the past, rooms that glowed with ancient enchantments, and a library that seemed to hold every secret of the vampire line. Lyra continued to be her guide, her laughter a shield against the shadows. "See, it's not so scary," Lyra said one day, tugging Alara toward a hidden balcony that overlooked the cliffs. "The castle is alive, but in a good way." Alara laughed softly, her fear melting with each passing moment. And yet she could not ignore the pull she felt toward Valerius, the king whose life had been shaped by grief, whose power was matched only by the weight of his solitude. One night, as the wind howled outside and snow swirled against the windows, Valerius stood at the edge of the terrace, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Alara approached cautiously. "The curse, it is stronger than I imagined," she said quietly. "And yet I feel like I am meant to be here, to help you, to help Lyra." Valerius' eyes softened, the harsh lines of command fading for a moment. "You are brave," he said. "But understand this, the curse tests all who love us. Those who enter my life, they must be prepared for danger, sorrow, and choices that may break their hearts." Alara met his gaze steadily. "Then I will not turn away," she said. "Not from you, not from Lyra, not from this place." For a long moment Valerius said nothing. Then almost imperceptibly he inclined his head. "We shall see," he murmured, and in those two words Alara felt both a challenge and a promise. The castle seemed to breathe around them, alive with shadows and secrets. Alara knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with dangers she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that for the first time in her life she had a place, a purpose, and a bond that was stronger than fear. As the moonlight bathed the castle in silver, Lyra's laughter echoed softly in the halls. And in the quiet, Alara felt the weight of the curse, the pull of destiny, and the fragile beginnings of a love that might one day break even the darkest shadows. The library, the gardens, and the hidden chambers all seemed to whisper a single truth: this is only the beginning. And somewhere in the deep shadows, the eyes of the past watched closely, waiting to see if the courage of the living could withstand the power of the cursed. The storm outside the castle raged with a fierce intensity, wind rattling the windows and lightning flashing across the sky. Inside, the halls were dimly lit, shadows twisting in corners where candlelight struggled to reach. Alara moved cautiously through the corridors, Lyra skipping beside her as though the storm were a game rather than a warning. "Do you think Father will be angry?" Lyra asked, glancing up at her. "I just wanted to play outside." Alara smiled faintly, brushing the wet strands of hair from the little girl's face. "He may be concerned, but that does not mean he is angry. He worries because he cares." Lyra's small hands gripped Alara's tightly. "I like you, Mom," she whispered, "even if Father is scary sometimes." Alara laughed softly, a warmth blooming in her chest despite the cold and dark outside. "I like you too, Lyra. You've made this castle feel like home." Home. The word felt strange on her lips, yet comforting. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt a place where she belonged, even in a world of shadows and whispered dangers. That evening, Valerius approached the terrace where Alara had been arranging candles for Lyra. His presence was commanding, as always, but something in his gaze had softened. The storm's wind tugged at his coat and hair, but he did not flinch. "You are becoming familiar with the ways of this castle," he said, his voice low, smooth, yet carrying that unmistakable authority that made Alara's heart beat faster. "I try," she replied quietly, though her hands trembled slightly as she moved the last candle. "It is a lot to understand, but I want to learn." Valeria stepped closer, the air between them charged with a subtle tension neither could ignore. Many who enter these halls are tested, not only by the curse but by their own hearts. You have endured much already, yet the greater trials have not yet begun." Alara met his gaze steadily, feeling a strange pull toward him that both frightened and exhilarated her. "I will face them," she said softly, "for Lyra and for you." He studied her for a long moment, the shadows of the storm dancing across his features. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Courage is rare," he said, "but do not mistake courage for understanding. Love and danger are entwined here. Those who enter my life risk everything." Alara felt her heart tighten. She had never been more certain of anything in her life. "Then I accept the risk," she whispered. The storm grew fiercer, thunder rolling like the footsteps of unseen giants. Inside, the castle seemed to respond to the energy outside, the walls vibrating with a subtle, almost alive pulse. Alara glanced at Valerius, noticing a flicker of emotion in his eyes that was usually hidden beneath centuries of stoic control. Over the following days, the bond between Alara and Valerius deepened. Lyra remained the bridge, her innocence and joy softening the sharp edges of the king's demeanor. They shared quiet moments in the library, where Valerius taught Alara to read the signs of the castle's enchantments, to sense the currents of magic that flowed through its walls, and to understand the subtle language of shadows. One afternoon, while exploring a hidden garden terrace that had been closed for decades, Alara found herself facing Valerius alone. The garden was overgrown, with vines curling around statues and fountains that had long since stopped flowing. Moonlight spilled through broken windows, casting silver patterns across the stone floor. "You should not have come here alone," Valerius said, his voice calm but sharp. "This place, it holds the echoes of the past. Those echoes are not always kind." "I wanted to see it," Alara replied softly. "It is beautiful in its own way, even if it is broken." Valerius' eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a trace of vulnerability to show. "Beauty can exist even in shadow," he said quietly. "But not all who see it can endure the truths it hides." Alara stepped closer, drawn by something she could not name. I think I can," she said. "I want to, not just for Lyra, but for you too." Valerius studied her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he extended his hand, a gesture that carried centuries of authority yet invited trust. Alara took it, feeling a strange warmth spread through her despite the cold stone around them. The connection between them was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight neither could ignore. A bond was forming, one that defied the centuries of caution and grief Valerius had built around himself. Meanwhile, Lyra was blissfully unaware of the tension building between the adults. She ran through the halls, laughing and calling out for both of them, her joy echoing like sunlight in the shadows. She tugged at Alara's hand, urging her to join a game of hide-and-seek, and even Valerius allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to tug at his lips. But as warmth grew, so did the shadow of danger. Word of the castle's vulnerability had reached rival clans, and whispers of an attack began to stir. Valerius sensed it first, the faint ripple in the currents of magic, the subtle shift in the shadows, the whisper of eyes watching from afar. "Alara," he said one evening, his voice tense as he entered her room, "the world outside these walls is not silent. You must understand that staying here, even for love, carries peril." "I understand," she replied quietly, "but I will not leave Lyra or you. Whatever comes, we face it together." Valerius studied her for a long moment, the storm outside echoing the storm within his mind. He had ruled for centuries, yet no one had ever dared to step into his world with such courage. The pull he felt toward Alara was undeniable, yet dangerous. That night, as the wind howled and lightning illuminated the castle in stark flashes, the first attack came. Shadows moved unnaturally, shapes slipping through the castle gates with deadly intent. Alara was with Lyra when the commotion began, the little girl's laughter dying in her throat as she realized the danger. "Mom!" Lyra cried, clutching her hand tightly. Alara's heart raced. "Stay close to me," she whispered. Her courage burned bright even as fear gripped her. She led Lyra toward the library, hoping to find Valerius there. The castle seemed alive, responding to the danger. Corridors shifted subtly, walls guiding them away from immediate threat, yet the sounds of pursuit echoed relentlessly. Valerius appeared like a shadow, moving with grace and power, his eyes fierce with protective fury. He took in the situation with a single glance, assessing the intruders and calculating their movements with centuries of experience. Lyra, stay behind me," he commanded, his voice low and resonant. Alara nodded, gripping Lyra's hand. The shadows moved closer, but Valerius did not hesitate. His presence was overwhelming, a storm of strength and authority as he faced the intruders with calculated power. Alara watched, heart pounding, as the king defended them. The battle was swift, precise, and terrifying. Yet even in the midst of danger she felt something profound, a connection, a bond that had grown from trust, courage, and shared vulnerability. When the threat finally passed, the castle fell silent once more. The storm outside had quieted, leaving only the echo of distant thunder. Ilara stood beside Valerius, her hand still gripping Lyra's, her heart racing with adrenaline and relief. Valerius looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, he allowed a faint smile. "You have endured more than most," he said quietly. "You have shown courage, heart, and something I thought I had lost long ago." Ilara's chest tightened. "What is that?" she asked softly. "Trust," he replied, "and hope." Lyra, sensing the calm after the storm, ran forward, hugging them both tightly. "See, we are strong, nothing can break us." Ilara smiled, feeling a warmth that defied the darkness of the past weeks. Yet she knew the danger was far from over. Shadows lingered, curses remained, and the world beyond the castle walls was still filled with threats. But for the first time, she felt a bond that could withstand the shadows. Between her, Valerius, and Lyra, a fragile, powerful connection had begun to form, one that would face every challenge, every danger, and every curse together. The candlelight flickered softly, casting long shadows across the walls, and Ilara understood one truth above all: love and courage were stronger than fear, and the storm that had threatened them could never extinguish the spark that now burned between them. Outside, the night was calm once more, yet the castle seemed alive with whispers, secrets, and unseen eyes. The trials were not over. Danger still lingered in the distance. But inside, in the warmth of trust and the beginnings of a forbidden bond, Ilara realized that she was no longer alone. She had a place, a purpose, and a connection that even shadows could not erase. And somewhere in the silent corners of the castle, the ancient curse stirred, sensing the strength of the bond, and plotting the trials it would set next. The first light of dawn barely touched the castle, and yet the halls were alive with a tense energy. After the attack the night before, the atmosphere was thick with shadows and whispers. Ilara stood in the grand hall, Lyra clinging to her side, and Valerius at her other side, his expression sharp and protective. The crimson mark on Ilara's palm, faint but persistent, seemed to throb with a quiet warning. The curse had stirred once more. The castle, alive with centuries of magic, seemed to hum under its influence, testing their bond and their courage. Valerius' gaze swept across the hall, assessing every corner, every shadow. "They will come again," he said, his voice low and commanding. "The forces that oppose us, they have learned that this castle is vulnerable, that you are here." Ilara's chest tightened. Fear lingered, but it no longer controlled her. "Then we will face them," she said, her voice steady. "Together." Lyra hugged her tightly, her small face full of determination. "We are strong. We survived the storm before. We can survive again." Valerius studied her, the faintest flicker of admiration softening the sharp edges of his expression. "You have grown in courage," he said. "But courage alone will not be enough. You must trust the bond we share, the bond that carries the strength of heart and shadow." Ilara nodded. "I trust it, I trust you." The day stretched into a tense silence. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of every room, as if the castle itself were testing them. Magic hummed faintly in the walls, and every echo reminded them of the curse's reach. Finally, as dusk fell, the enemy arrived. A band of sorcerers and shadow warriors, their forms cloaked in black, eyes glowing with malice. The air crackled with dark energy, and even the castle seemed to shiver at their presence. Valerius stepped forward, tall and commanding, his aura of power radiating through the hall. Ilara stood beside him, gripping Lyra's hand, her resolve unshaken. She could feel the pulse of magic within the castle, the currents responding to her courage, and something in her chest told her they had the power to endure. "Stay behind me," Valerius instructed. "But do not be afraid. Your strength is part of this bond." Ilara's heart raced. She had never faced such danger before, yet she felt a strange exhilaration, a clarity of purpose that filled her with courage. She would not falter. Not now, not ever. The battle began with a flurry of movement. Shadows twisted and lunged, magic sparking through the air. Valerius moved with deadly precision, his centuries of experience unmatched. But he did not fight alone. Alara felt the energy within the castle respond to her determination, the faint glow of her courage rippling through the halls. Lyra clung to her side, whispering encouragements. "We can do it. We are strong." Alara drew strength from her words, stepping forward, her heart beating with focus. She could sense the patterns of the enemy, anticipate their moves, and guide Valerius with subtle gestures. Together, they were a force that even shadows could not easily overcome. The crimson mark on Alara's palm pulsed brightly, reacting to the danger and to the power of the bond they shared. Valerius noticed it and gave her a sharp, approving look. "Good," he said, almost under his breath. "The castle recognizes your courage. You are part of its strength now." With a final surge, Valerius unleashed a wave of energy that drove the intruders back. Shadows dissolved under the force of light and power, and the remaining enemies fled into the night, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Alara collapsed into Valerius' side, exhausted but exhilarated. Lyra ran to him, hugging him tightly. "We did it. We survived." Valerius allowed himself a rare smile, his arms enveloping both women in a protective embrace. "Yes," he said softly, "because we face everything together." The castle seemed to sigh with relief, the currents of magic calming, the shadows retreating. For the first time, the halls were quiet, peaceful, and alive, not with tension, but with a sense of enduring strength. Later, in the candle-lit library, Valerius and Alara sat across from one another, Lyra curled up beside them. The storm had passed, leaving only the warmth of firelight and the faint scent of old books in the air. "You have shown remarkable courage," Valerius said, his gaze steady. "Not many would have faced such danger, let alone endured it." Alara blushed, looking down at her hands. I couldn't have done it without Lyra," she said softly, "and without you trusting me." Valerius reached across the table, covering her hands with his. "Trust is earned," he said, "and you have earned it not only through courage but through heart. The bond we share, it is stronger than the curse, stronger than the shadows. It is real." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest, a fragile yet undeniable joy. For the first time, she understood the depth of connection and the power of love that endured even through darkness and fear. Lyra looked up from her lap, her silver eyes shining. "See, I told you, Mom and Father, we are strong together." Valerius allowed himself a full smile, rare and genuine. "Yes," he agreed, "we are strong together." Days passed in a serene rhythm, the castle calm after the storm of danger. Alara learned more of its secrets, explored hidden chambers, and discovered the depth of the magic that bound its walls. She and Valerius grew closer, their bond unspoken yet undeniable, their glances and gestures carrying meanings words could not capture. Lyra remained their heart, the light that softened shadows and reminded them of the joy that endured even through centuries of sorrow. Together, the three of them formed a fragile but unbreakable family, a trio bound by trust, courage, and love. One evening, as the sun set behind the cliffs, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Valerius led Alara to the highest terrace of the castle. Below, the gardens shimmered with moonlight, and the sea stretched endlessly, reflecting the colors of the sky. "You have changed this castle," Valerius said quietly, his hand brushing against hers. "Not through power or knowledge, but through heart. You have shown me something I thought lost forever, hope." Alara felt her chest tighten, overwhelmed by the gravity of his words. "And you have shown me courage," she whispered. "The courage to face not just fear but the unknown, to believe in something stronger than myself." For a long moment they stood together in silence, the wind carrying their shared breath across the terrace. Lyra's laughter echoed faintly from below, a reminder of the bond that tied them together, stronger than any curse or shadow. Valerius lowered his gaze to hers, the centuries of solitude in his eyes slowly softening into something else, something vulnerable, yet enduring. "The curse may test us again," he said, "but no shadow can break what we have built. No darkness can undo the bond we share." Alara nodded, feeling a deep sense of belonging she had never known. "Then we face it together, always." The crimson mark on her palm faded completely, as though the bond had sealed the challenge, proving that courage and heart could overcome even ancient curses. The castle itself seemed to exhale, its walls settling into a quiet strength that mirrored the calm in their hearts. Lyra ran up to them holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the overgrown gardens. "For us," she said proudly, handing them to Alara. "For our family." Alara smiled, her eyes shining. "Thank you, my brave little one." Valerius took the flowers, letting them rest between their hands, a symbol of life, hope, and the bond that now tied them all together. "Family," he said softly, "a word I thought I had forgotten, but now it is ours." The three of them stood on the terrace as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the castle. The storm had passed, the enemies had fled, and the curse, though still lingering in ancient corners, had no hold over the strength of their unity. Alara realized something profound. That love was not the absence of danger, but the courage to face it together. That hope could endure even in the darkest of places. And that family, chosen and bound by heart, could triumph over shadows older than time itself. The castle, once a place of fear and ancient sorrow, was now alive with warmth, laughter, and the quiet strength of three hearts beating in unison. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, Alara, Valerius, and Lyra knew one truth above all. Together they could face anything. Together they had turned shadows into light, curses into lessons, and fear into courage. The bond they shared was eternal, unbreakable, and luminous, a testament to love, hope, and the courage to endure. The castle, silent and ancient, seemed to acknowledge it, for in the heart of darkness, three lights now burned brighter than any shadow ever could.